My name is Charlie, I'm 25 years old. Today I'm going to talk about the day that my sister didn't let me see my father's will, but I had a copy and I inherited everything. It's a pleasure to have you here. Stay tuned until the end, and tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story has gone. And click on like, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss the next stories here on the channel. I stood by the back door of the church, gripping the edge of my coat like it could hold me together. It was raining lightly, one of those cold, persistent drizzles that soaked through your bones. People were already inside, faces I hadn't seen in years. I recognized a few cousins, a former neighbor, one of Dad's old coworkers. But no one looked my way. No one even seemed to notice I was there. When I walked in, the ceremony had already started. Melissa was up front, dabbing her eyes with a tissue like she was the grieving queen. She wore all black, her hair perfectly straightened, sitting beside our mother who looked tired but composed. I found a seat in the last pew. No one had told me what time it would start. I only knew because an old friend of Dad's had messaged me late the night before. Melissa hadn't called, hadn't texted. Not even a group message. Nothing. It had been like that for months. After Dad got sick, he asked to move into my small apartment near downtown. Melissa said he should be in a facility, that I wasn't mature enough to take care of him. But he chose to come with me. And for 6 months, I fed him, changed him, cleaned his sheets. I was the one up at 3 a.m. when he couldn't breathe. Melissa visited twice. And now here she was, accepting condolences like she'd been the one holding his hand the night he died. The pastor began his speech, going on about Dad's generosity, his loyalty, his love for his family. He mentioned Melissa by name. Thanked her for arranging everything. He didn't mention me. Not once. I sat frozen, staring at the floor. I couldn't tell if it was shame, anger, or just heartbreak. Maybe all of it. My hands were cold. I remember that clearly. So cold they felt like stone. After the ceremony, people began to file out to the reception room. I approached the front slowly, hoping to say a quiet goodbye near the casket. Melissa was still there, talking to 2 aunts. As I got closer, I caught her eye. She turned her back. I waited. Maybe she didn't see me? I said her name. She kept her back to me. Melissa. I said again, this time louder. She finally turned around, her face blank. Now's not the time, Charlie. I just wanted to know. About the will. Did Dad leave something? She looked at me like I'd just spit on the casket. You're seriously asking me that here? He lived with me. We talked about it before he got worse. I just want to know if he said anything. She gave me a smile I'll never forget. That quiet, fake, venomous smile. He didn't leave anything, Charlie. There's no will. He didn't have time. I felt like I'd been slapped. He didn't. He told me he had a draft. Melissa stepped in close and whispered, "Let it go. You always make things harder than they have to be." I watched as she turned back to the guests, her arm hooked with our mother's, both of them smiling at someone as if I had evaporated. I left the church shaking. It wasn't just the grief. It wasn't even the humiliation. It was the sinking, horrible feeling that I'd been erased. That I'd spent half a year watching my father fade away, only to be cut out of everything in the end. Not even a name mentioned. Not even a seat saved. I got into my car and sat there, hands on the wheel, but I didn't start it. Because I remembered something. A night, 3 months before he died. Dad had been lucid, soft-spoken, tired but present. He asked me to get a blue folder from the bedroom drawer. Inside it was a manila envelope. He handed it to me and said, "Keep this safe. In case something happens." I had tucked it into a box of personal things when I moved his stuff out after he passed. I never opened it. Until now. The rain was falling harder. I sat still as stone, my heart racing. The truth sitting just beneath my fingertips, waiting. Would it say what I thought it did? Would it change everything? I didn't sleep that night. The envelope sat on my kitchen table while I paced in circles, every minute stretching like hours. I didn't want to open it right away. I was scared of being wrong. Scared it would be something else. Just some medical forms. A letter. A note. But it wasn't. It was a copy of Dad's will. Typed, signed, notarized. My name was everywhere. The house, his savings, even the old truck. Everything had been left to me. He'd written a paragraph about Melissa, too, that she had already received significant financial support, and he trusted she'd be fine, that he wanted me to have stability for once. I read that part 3 times. For once. That was the part that broke me, because it meant he knew. He knew the way things had been, the way they treated me, the way Melissa twisted things. And he'd actually tried, to make it right. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It was like I'd gone numb. The next morning, I made an appointment with a lawyer. I didn't tell anyone. Melissa had lied to me. Flat out, calmly, with that smug, ice-cold certainty she always used when she wanted to remind me of my place. But she didn't know I had the will. The lawyer, Mr. Feldman, was kind but cautious. He looked over the documents, asked me a lot of questions, and finally leaned back in his chair. "Charlie," he said, "this will is legally sound. If you want to proceed, you can. But I'm going to be honest, it will get messy." I nodded. She already made it messy. He gave me a look I couldn't quite read. Pity maybe. Or something close to it. The next few days felt like walking through a fog. Melissa sent a group message to the family, thanking everyone for their support, talking about some kind of family meeting she wanted to hold about Dad's estate. I wasn't included in the message. A cousin forwarded it to me. I showed up anyway. The meeting was in Mom's living room. I arrived 10 minutes early. Melissa opened the door, blinked, and stepped aside like I was a stray dog wandering in. Everyone went quiet when they saw me. I sat on the edge of the couch, clutching my folder. Melissa started talking like nothing was wrong, passing out papers that summarized what she said were the financial leftovers. No mention of Dad's house. No mention of his account. No mention of me. When she finished, I opened my folder and placed a copy of the will on the coffee table. Everyone stared at it. Melissa's face didn't move. For one long second, she just stared at the paper like it was written in another language. Then she laughed. Short. Cold. "Where did you get this?" "Dad gave it to me. Months ago." "This is fake." "It's not. It's notarized. Dated. I had it reviewed." My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. She looked at Mom. "Do you believe this?" Mom didn't say anything. I pressed on. "He didn't want me to be left with nothing. He knew what you'd do. That's why he didn't give it to you. He gave it to me." Melissa leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "You're unbelievable. You lied to me. You told me there was no will. You looked me in the eye at his funeral and lied. You're not the only one who lost him, Charlie." "No. But I'm the one who took care of him. Not you. Not anyone else." The room was silent. Melissa stood up, gathered her papers and stormed out. Mom followed without a word. One uncle stayed behind and looked at me. "She's going to fight it," he said. "You know that, right?" I nodded. And I was ready. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't backing down. And I wasn't alone. Not anymore. I had my father's words, his signature, and maybe, just maybe, his faith in me. But I also knew this was just the beginning. Melissa wouldn't give up. And the worst was still coming. What would you do if it were you? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell to receive all notifications so you don't miss the next story. Melissa's first move came 3 days later. I was walking out of the grocery store when I saw the envelope sticking out of my mailbox. Her name was on the return address. No stamp. She had driven to my place and dropped it off herself. Inside was a typed letter from her lawyer, claiming I had presented a fraudulent document, and that the family would be seeking legal action. I read it twice. My hands were shaking. Not because I was scared of court, because it meant she was serious. She was going to war. I called Mr. Feldman. He sounded calm. "They'll push. Let them. That document is valid. We'll file for probate immediately. The court will decide." That week, I didn't hear from Mom. Not even a text. Nothing. It was like I had vanished all over again. The silence hurt worse than Melissa's threat. I spent my days reviewing every box, every drawer, every folder Dad had left behind. I was searching for anything that could help reinforce what the will already said. Notes. Bank records. Proof of conversations. I found a few things, some scribbled lists in his handwriting, labeled for Charlie. He had written out a plan to transfer the house title. I showed all of it to Mr. Feldman. It helped. We filed the will in court. Melissa responded with a formal contest. The following month was a blur of court papers and legal jargon. Melissa's lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, claiming I had isolated Dad in his final months, that I had influenced him, lied to him, exploited him while he was vulnerable. It was a disgusting thing to read about yourself. But I wasn't surprised. That was her strategy, make me look like a manipulator. I submitted medical records, testimony from the hospice nurse, and a notarized letter Dad had written 2 months before he passed. It said he was in sound mind, and that he had chosen to live with me, of his own will. Still, Melissa kept pushing. Through back channels, she called family members and claimed I was trying to steal everything. She knew how to twist people. A few aunts stopped talking to me. One cousin blocked me entirely. But some people didn't believe her. My uncle, the one who stayed after that family meeting, called me a week before the hearing. Your dad was proud of you, he said. He talked about you all the time before he got sick. Don't let her rewrite the truth. I held on to that tightly. The first hearing was brutal. Melissa showed up in a navy blue suit, perfectly composed. She had Mom with her. They looked like a team. I sat alone at our table with Mr. Feldman. I told the truth. I spoke clearly. I said how I had cared for Dad. That I didn't isolate him. I protected him. That the will was his decision, not mine. I kept my voice steady. Even when Melissa rolled her eyes or whispered to her lawyer. The judge listened. Mr. Feldman presented every shred of evidence. The original will. The nurse's letter. The signed affidavit. Dad's list. Everything. Melissa's lawyer attacked everything. They claimed Dad had dementia, that he was confused, that he didn't know what he was signing. The judge asked for medical evaluations. We provided them. It became clear by the end of the session that Melissa hadn't expected me to be so prepared. She didn't look so confident anymore. As we left the courtroom, she brushed past me in the hallway. You'll regret this, she hissed. I looked her in the eye for the first time in years. No, I won't. And I meant it. But even then, I didn't know how far she was willing to go. Not until I came home one night and saw my apartment door open, just slightly. I pushed it gently. Everything inside looked fine at first. But then I saw my folder on the kitchen counter. The one with all the documents. It was gone. I stood in my apartment for a full minute, staring at the empty spot on the counter where the folder had been. My chest was tight. My throat burned. I walked from room to room, checking drawers, cabinets, under the bed. Nothing else was missing. Just the folder. Whoever had come in knew exactly what they were looking for. I called Mr. Feldman immediately. He told me to file a police report. It won't get the documents back, he said, but it's important to have it on record, especially if we end up in another hearing. The original will, thankfully, was still secured at his office. But the copies, the personal notes, my collection of backup documents, they were gone. I filed the report. But I knew who it was. Melissa had a key. From years ago, before things fell apart. I never changed the locks. I didn't think I had to. That night, I changed them myself. My hands were trembling the whole time. The next morning, I sent Melissa a message. If you wanted something, you could have asked. Breaking into my apartment is a crime. I've filed a report. The original will is still safe. You didn't win anything. She didn't reply. But the silence from her was nothing compared to the silence from Mom. Weeks passed, and I heard nothing. Not a single call. Not even a passive-aggressive email. It was like she had made a decision, that I was the enemy, and chosen her side. It hurt more than anything. Even after everything Melissa had done, I kept waiting for Mom to say, "That's enough." To step in. To call me and say she knew I was telling the truth. But she never did. It was the kind of absence that screamed louder than words. Still, the case moved forward. The judge ruled that the will was valid, and my rights to the estate were intact. Melissa's contest was denied. The house was legally mine. So was Dad's savings and everything else he had left behind. It was over. But there was no celebration. No relief. Just exhaustion. I went to the house the day the ruling was finalized. It had been locked up for months. Melissa never came back after the funeral, and Mom never lived there. I walked through each room slowly. Dust had settled on everything. In Dad's bedroom, I found one of his old cardigans still folded on the dresser. I picked it up and held it close. It still smelled like him. That's when the tears came. Quiet. Heavy. Not just grief for losing him, but grief for everything else. For the family that turned against me, for the years I spent trying to be seen, for the girl I used to be who always hoped someone would defend her. She was gone now. I spent the next few days at the house. Cleaning. Sorting. Repairing. I fixed the door hinge he never got around to. Painted the porch railing. I wanted it to feel alive again. Not like a battleground. Neighbors stopped by. A few offered condolences. One older woman, Mrs. Bell, brought over banana bread and said she used to talk to my dad every morning when he walked his dog. He always talked about you, she said. Said you had the kindest heart. I had to step inside before I started crying again. That night, I found an old metal box in the back of his closet. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to me. I read the first one. It was dated over a year ago. Charlie, if you're reading this, I hope the worst is over. I'm sorry for the things I didn't say while I was alive. I saw what they did to you. I knew you were hurting. I should have stepped in more, but I didn't want to cause more damage. I see now that silence caused more harm than words ever could. I'm proud of you. I love you. And if you're holding this, it means I trusted you to carry on what I couldn't. I read every letter, one by one. He had written about our walks. About the nights I stayed up with him. About his regrets, his fears, and his love. It was all there. Proof I hadn't imagined it. Proof that he saw me. I didn't tell anyone about the letters. I didn't need to, because in that moment, something inside me shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quiet. But solid. I had won. Not because of the court ruling, but because the only person who had ever made me feel invisible had finally made me feel seen. And Melissa had no power over that. Still, I knew it wasn't the end. Because Melissa wasn't finished. And she hated losing more than anything. Melissa came back with venom. A week after the ruling, she sent me an email. Just one line. Enjoy it while it lasts. The next day, I got a letter from her new lawyer. Different from the last one, claiming she had new evidence to reopen the case. They wanted a reconsideration of the ruling based on emotional manipulation and undue influence. It was baseless, but it was loud. Suddenly, I started getting messages from extended family again. Ones I hadn't heard from in years. Some were cautious. Some were clearly fed a different story. I got called greedy. Accused of grabbing power from a grieving sister. What they didn't see, what they would never see, was everything I had given up to take care of our dad. The nights I slept on the floor beside his bed. The money I spent. The life I paused. I didn't respond to anyone, but it chipped away at me. Until one morning, I found my mom on the porch of the house. I hadn't spoken to her in over 2 months. She just stood there, like nothing had happened, holding a small tin of tea cookies. I thought you might want these, she said. I opened the door slowly. She walked in like she still lived there. We sat at the kitchen table. She placed the cookies between us, folded her hands, and looked around. You've done a nice job with the place. It feels warm again. I didn't know what to say. My throat was dry. Finally I asked, why now? She hesitated. Melissa's making a mess. I told her to drop it, but she won't listen to me anymore. She never listened, I said. She used to, Mom whispered. When she was younger. I stared at her. There was no apology in her eyes. Just fatigue. She's always needed more, she said. More space. More attention. She can't handle not being in control. And what about me? You were easier. The words hit harder than I expected. They sounded like an admission, but they felt like an excuse. You let her lie to me, I said. You let her erase me. I thought you'd stand up for me just once. She didn't respond. I looked at her differently in that moment. Not with anger. Not even disappointment. Just clarity. I saw her not as my mother, but as a woman, flawed, passive, afraid. Someone who chose peace over justice. Who let one child swallow the other. She stood up to leave. I hope you find happiness here, Charlie. I really do. I closed the door behind her and didn't watch her walk away. That night, Melissa called me. I let it ring twice before answering. I want a meeting, she said. Just the two of us. No lawyers. No lawyers. I agreed. We met the next morning at a diner halfway between our places. She was already there, sipping coffee like she hadn't spent the last 6 months trying to erase me from our father's life. She got straight to the point. I want a cut. I didn't blink. You already had one. Dad said so himself. I want more. You're not entitled to more. She laughed, bitter and low. You really think you won? I didn't win. I was chosen. By him. You don't get to rewrite that. You're pathetic, she said. Always needing someone to validate you. He felt sorry for you. That's all this was. I stood up. Calm. I won't give you anything, Melissa. Not because I want revenge, but because you don't deserve it. And deep down you know that. She didn't follow me out. She didn't call again. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt something like peace. It wasn't over yet. I knew that. But the storm had cracked. And light was starting to come through the breaks. 3 months passed. No calls from Melissa. No letters from her lawyers. No more strange glances at the mailbox. Just silence. It was the kind that used to scare me. But now it felt like relief. The estate was fully transferred. The court issued the final order. The savings, the property, every legal thread, tied up. Melissa hadn't filed another appeal. It was over. Really over. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even tell anyone. I just opened the window of the living room one morning, breathed in the air, and sat quietly with a coffee, letting my shoulders drop for the first time in a year. I started rebuilding. Quietly. I sold a few things that belonged to Dad, but kept what mattered. His desk. His books. The worn leather chair he used to nap in, with the arm permanently dented from his elbow. I went back to school part-time. Nothing grand, just a couple of courses I had dropped when Dad moved in. I got a small job at the local library. It didn't pay much, but it was peaceful. Simple. I made the house my own. I painted the bedroom. Hung up photos I liked. I planted lavender in the front yard. People started waving when I walked to get groceries. Some even asked if I was George's daughter. Yes, I'd say. I am. And that was enough. One day, while cleaning out the basement, I found an old voice recorder tucked in a toolbox. When I clicked play, I heard my dad's voice. Raspy. Tired. But clear. I don't know if she'll ever hear this, he said. But Charlie, if you do, I want you to know I noticed. Every little thing. You were there when no one else was. I regret not saying more when I had the time. I wish I'd protected you better. But if this recording survives, let it be proof. I trusted you. I loved you. And I'm proud of you. I sat on the floor and played it twice more. Then I tucked it back in the box. I didn't need to share it. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. About a month later, I got a letter. No return address. Just my name, written in Melissa's sharp handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. You got what you wanted. I hope you're happy. Don't contact me again. No apology. No admission. Just an ending. I put it in the drawer with the other things that used to control me. That night, I made dinner for myself. Nothing fancy, just roasted chicken and vegetables. I sat by the window with a blanket, listening to the wind in the trees. And I realized I wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. Not for a mother's approval. Not for a sister's validation. Not even for closure. Because I had built something else. A quiet life. A life where I was seen, even if only by myself. One morning, while sorting through the letters Dad left me, I found a post-it note folded into one. I hadn't noticed it before. In his messy handwriting, he'd written, "Don't be afraid to start over. You're more than they ever let you be." And I believed him. For the first time in my life, I truly believed him. I was the forgotten one. The invisible daughter. And now I was the heir. To more than a house or a bank account. To dignity. To peace. To a version of myself they never got to destroy. If you like stories like these, click like, subscribe, activate the bell, and send it to someone you think will also like it.